In September of 2006, Florida Republican Congressman Mark Foley abruptly resigned after he was accused of sending sexually explicit internet messages to a former teenage male congressional page. Now, within days of the scandal breaking, multiple male pages said that they received similar messages from Foley. One even claimed that he had sex with the former congressman. After submitting his resignation, Foley checked himself into a rehab facility for alcoholism, among other issues. Now, this all happened just several weeks before the midterm elections that November. Now, 5 years later, he is here in studio, former Florida Congressman Mark Foley. Congressman, can I still call you Congressman?
Please do. Thank you, Sean.
All right. Well, good to see you. Thanks.
Thanks.
You've not done a national interview.
I've not.
That's this.
And I didn't plan it for this week. We had organized this prior to what?
We did, but, you know, maybe it's, you know, maybe there might be some insight you have that other people don't have. You know, I'm going to be honest, because I had interviewed you. You were a regular on our show.
Yes, sir.
For years. Interviewed you on radio. And I remember at the time how shocked I was, like a lot of people. And preparing for this interview, you know, and I went back and I'm reading this, you know, these exchanges with somebody you know is underaged. And it's so explicit. It's a kid talking about lacrosse and his mom and soccer. And I don't understand this.
I wouldn't expect you to. It was horrific behavior, Sean. It was wrong. I was wrong. But that's all I can do, is apologize and pray and continue to work on a recovery. Mm-hmm. It is regrettable. I embarrassed my family, the staff, my constituents, and the House of Representatives that I loved. I loved my job. I loved governing and being a part of the process. And I threw it all away. I have no one else to blame but myself.
Well, you did say you're mad at yourself and you'll punish yourself for the rest of your life. Do you punish yourself every day?
Absolutely.
How?
Just by reflecting. You know, anytime there's a scandal, it brings back the horrific pain that I caused people that I love. And there's no excuse for it. So as we go through this journey of life, we just have to, you know, pray every day that we are going to be a better human being, that we learn from these tragedies and these mistakes, and then go forward.
As I'm reading about this, have you ever reread it?
Yes, sir.
You did. Recently? Do you reread it every once in a while?
No, because I've learned that, you know, I understand the pain I caused. And I can't sit here and continue to torture myself. Maybe you can bring some insight to this. What is going through your mind? You know this is a young boy. It's a boy, it's a child. And you were a congressman. You were the chairman of the Missing and Exploited Children's Caucus. Yes, sir.
You know, I found some comments that you had made, and, you know, we're not going to allow them to voluntarily show up, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to track them like the animals they are. Were you an animal?
No, sir.
What's the difference?
Well, you learn again in therapy some of your challenges. You know, I saw the computer screen almost like a confessional in our church, where you're spewing things out and not really thinking of the consequences. But that's not a good enough excuse. At the end of the day, I'm at the board, and I'm the adult. I'm the responsible party. But I learned from that. And hopefully the example, maybe that I set, maybe people will learn.
You claimed later, and you went into rehab. Was it just for alcoholism? You claimed you were drunk at the time that all these things happened?
No, it emanated from the sexual abuse that I received from a priest. I was 11 years old.
Did you ever name the priest? Because your lawyer...
Yes, sir. Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, yes. The priest actually went on national TV and admitted it.
Mm-hmm. So, and you believe that changed you, altered you?
Well, when you're an 11-year-old and your first sexual encounter is with a priest, when you grew up in a Catholic faith and you were taught the lessons of the, 10 Commandments, do not lie, and the priest tells you first that this is good. Secondly, he suggests, keep it between us. And if you tell anybody, I'll kill myself. That's a fairly horrific burden for an 11-year-old.
Is that why you were a closet alcoholic?
Well, I think it adds to the secrecy of life. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell anybody that this had happened to me. I didn't even go to the self-help book section, because I was afraid of my political franchise. I didn't want anybody to see me reaching for something that could give me some understanding of the trauma that I had suffered as a child.
Listen, I will concede that I think it's been fairly well documented. Those that have been abused often become abusers. Now, as you see this through the prism of 5 years or the distance 5 years later, you were, well, did you ever have physical contact?
No, absolutely not.
There was the one case that they claimed you'd had. Is that true?
It was never a physical contact.
Okay.
And all of those allegations were disputed.
Okay. So
nothing happened to Pages in Congress. They had gone home. Doesn't make it better.
But you're the adult, it's just like
Yes, sir.
just like the priest was the adult. In that sense, do you think you became what you hated? Do you think you became?
I think to a large degree you become, a mirror image of something that may have happened. And that's not even a good enough excuse. I'm not trying to say my incident with the priest led me to do what I've done. Because, again, I should have, knowing what happened to me, sought some kind of counseling to understand the dynamics at play. Since then, of course, I've read every book imaginable about what are the consequences of abuse at that age.
Do you still have this thought process? I mean, I know you recently spoke to the young Republicans
Yes,
in
sir.
Palm Beach. Do you still have that thought process that
No.
you had at the time?
No.
Was it only when you were drinking?
It happened late at night. It happened late at night, and it was, again, you can't blame the alcohol, because you still have to. I mean, a lot of people drink and they don't do stupid things.
You say you think about this every day. Not a day goes by you don't think about it?
Well, you think about what you've done to your parents. You think about what you've done to the people involved in your life. You think about the people on the other end of the conversation. So if you're a responsible person, you just don't walk away and say, okay, I'm better, everything's good.
What are the other regrets? You let people down. It had a big impact that election year, at least I believe so. Disrespected your office.
Well, the big regrets are things like the notion that was planted in the press that Speaker Hastert and others covered my behavior.
Hastert never knew.
Listen, Denny Hastert was a coach like my father, a high school coach. If Denny Hastert was aware of these emails and had come across any information about these emails.
He told me in a radio interview he did not know.
Sean, I wouldn't be going to an ethics committee. Denny Hastert would have punched me in the nose.
What about Rahm Emanuel? We've now found out, did he know that they had these a year earlier and they held it for just before the election?
The person who ran against me, Tim Mahoney, went to a law firm, a reputable firm, and told them he had emails 6 months prior to the election.
It's pretty sleazy of Rahm Emanuel.
Well,
because if he really, and I want to talk about this because there's a double standard. At the time, Nancy Pelosi made comments, and she said at the time they were protecting Mark Foley instead of protecting the children.
Absolutely not. See, that is what infuriates me. John Shimkus, Speaker Hastert, John Boehner, these are not people that would cover if they knew.
They didn't know.
No, they did not know.
But Rahm Emanuel knew.
I believe strongly, and I think people have said, who provided the emails to the DNC, that he had them. He was asked on Good Morning America, or one of the shows.
No, George Stephanopoulos, and he parsed his words. I did not see them. Were you aware of them? I did not see them. Were you aware of them? He played this game. And then Nancy Pelosi went on to say they're so out of touch with the American people, they didn't know it was wrong to ignore the repulsive behavior of one of their members, a member of Congress who should be held to a higher standard. They thought it was okay to cover up, so you make the judgment. Now, she said that about you, and now we've gone through this week with Anthony Weiner. What do you have to say to Nancy Pelosi?
Nancy Pelosi has to say whatever she wants.
All right, we're going to come back. We'll get your thoughts on Anthony Weiner. And coming up, much more of my exclusive interview with former Florida Congressman Mark Foley and much more on Hannity straight ahead. And we continue now with former Florida Congressman Mark Foley. All right, so all this stuff, we have a ton of scandals. We got McGreevey. We've got Spitzer. We've got Arnold Schwarzenegger. We've got Senator Vitter. We got Senator Ensign. We've got, you were, in a sense, early in this. Now Anthony Weiner is involved in this whole thing, sending pornographic material to strangers on the internet. What are your thoughts on what he's going through right now, and should he resign?
Well, I know what he's going through from the feeling of remorse, because there's no question you feel terrible.
Is he feeling that because he got caught, or is he feeling that because he feels bad about his behavior?
Possible for me to analyze him. All I know is what I did when I looked in the mirror and was confronted with the charges. I first considered my family, my community, my staff, and the Congress that I loved. Those were my defining moments of a decision I had to make. Resignation was the only option. I'm not suggesting had I waited 24 hours, the leadership would have given me a pass. But in my heart, I said, there are consequences for your actions. You can't just simply say, let me have a timeout. Let me apologize to everybody. I had to step out of the process. I had to get help, and I did. And I've recovered from that help. But while I was in the cauldron, I would have never fixed my life. I would have never fixed what was fundamentally wrong with me.
Maybe to give some insight, because again, I don't understand it, because you're a congressman. You're sending out emails to kids. At some point, didn't it race through your mind? At one point in the email, when you're getting very explicit with a 16-year-old kid, he says, "Oh, my mom is coming in." Didn't you ever fear getting caught? Did you ever think this kid this might get out?
I think if you had a fear, you wouldn't do it. I think if
you didn't have that fear.
Well, I don't want to diminish it. I think there's always a fear, but you're not in control of your behavior. You should be, but I'm saying you're at a different place, inexplicable maybe, but at the end of the day, I'm at the keyboard. I can't say it's someone else. It's not the person behind me.
I hear you taking responsibility. Is it the culture? Is it? You get in this atmosphere of people calling you congressman, they're looking up to you, they want your autograph. I don't know. Is it, there's an impulse control issue that I see with Weiner. It seemed like, it's so reckless that he's sending emails and explicit pictures and messages to people he doesn't even know.
I think it's a number of things. I think all day you are adulated. People say, "Oh, Congressman, you're the greatest thing we have in our community." And maybe there's a lacking there. Maybe it's an ego. Maybe it's an immaturity with new technology. I mean, I know in my heart I would never say those things if somebody's in front of me. The technology, as I mentioned, the computer
anonymity?
Well, right, you're between a screen and you're, like I said, the confessional. When you say things in your confessional, you blurt them out. The priest on the other side of it says 3 Hail Marys, 2 Our Fathers. And you walk away absolved, or at least you feel absolved of those guilts. The computer was to a degree, that same methodology. And so I know in my heart I wouldn't have said these things. Anthony probably wouldn't either. And that's the uniqueness of why this internet is trapping and capturing so many people.
How do you compartmentalize, though, being on this committee for exploited children and knowing you're doing this with an underage kid? I mean, there's a disconnect.
There is a disconnect.
I remember Jennifer Aniston once said about Brad Pitt, there's like a missing chip. And I'm not playing a psychoanalyst, but it seems that there's a missing connection here,
Well, I think, in your own mind, you're trying your best to protect people, having had something happen to you. And you're using this platform, if you will, to make certain similar 11, 12, 13-year-old kids don't get put upon. And yes, there's a disconnect.
But then you're putting upon them.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. That's the disconnect. And that's where, stepping back, having to take the full responsibility for my actions. And I hope I have achieved that. Mm-hmm. I didn't sit there and try and run the clock out. I said this was wrong, and I resigned.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, as you looked at the election results that night, it was, 5 weeks before the election, that all this happened with you, did you blame yourself? Did you feel you had a big part? That became probably the defining issue in that campaign, late in the campaign.
No question. It was a tipping point. I mean, we were 33 seats down in February. We had a lot of issues on our plate, Iraq and other things. But I gave the momentum to that decline. And for that, I regretted. I regretted hurting people. I regretted hearing people accuse a good man like Speaker Hastert of trying to cover for me. Those were horrific charges against kind people.
Do you ever think about the office? Do you forget? Do you disrespect the office because you're elected as a public servant?
Good question.
And that went through your mind.